Welcome to the session Operationalizing NIST with Veeam. I'm joined by my colleague, Emily Tellez, and we're really excited to go through all the ever-growing regulations that you face today and the reason they have become in this world of evolving cyber threats. So to kick it off, don't want to scare folks with all the regulations, similar to how there's a lot of ransomware statistics that are scary. Trying to follow the regulations that go with them can be just as intimidating. And when you look at the EU with things like NIST 2, DORA, Digital Operational Resilience Act, Cyber Resilience Act, and then you look on the other side with the US with things like HIPAA that are familiar to us, CERCIA, which is critical to critical infrastructure, and then SEC if you're a publicly traded company. All of these regulations have things related to third-party management, incident response, data protection, detection and prevention, and they're all meant to help organizations respond better to cyber threats. It's not meant to make your job more difficult. And this is one of the key reasons we've seen the payment of ransomware attacks go significantly down. When you look back at 2018, 2019, the rate of payment was over 80%. And there's multiple reasons why that rate of payment has gone down, but some of it has to do with there's actually consequences to these actions now, and there's actually more accountability for these organizations that they have to uphold, in addition to the fact of what we do here day in and day out in terms of keeping customers' data is actually protected and giving them an option to recovery during an incident.
Yeah, and a key thing there, Brad, I just want to highlight, right, is that, again, these regulations are not meant to scare you, but they were meant because of an action, right? Because of what we saw from different threats that were very pervasive from a strong period of time, that this is kind of the government or everybody else's reaction to try to help to, consolidate those payment terms and consolidate, having those threat actors continue to grow and when it comes to the overall threat landscape. So, a lot of these things that we're going to be discussing today, though there might be a lot of information that we're going to give to you, we are going to try to boil it down so that way you can take some of the key pieces in here and go ahead and apply those effectively to your infrastructure that you have today.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And the good news with some of this is these are relatively new regulations. Many of these started a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. Some of them are still being implemented. So although the penalties can be a little scary, up to 15 million or 2% of revenue in the case of the EU fines, the America fines are a little lighter. There's very few actual incidents where organizations have been fined because all these are relatively new. They want to give organizations time to get up to speed. Now, rather than go through what each one of these organizations have for regulations, we'd probably be here for the entire day and we'd be listing thousands of requirements. Wanted to try to boil it down into what they all have in common, right? And what you see, what key common requirements are, whether it's an EU regulatory body or an America regulatory body, is it's around risk management and governance. It's around incident response, right? So some of these, like if you're a publicly traded company, you have to report if you've been hit by an attack in a certain amount of time, or you have to report if you've paid a cyber threat actor. So there's certain things in terms of timing that you have to consider based on what regulatory body you kind of align to. And then you see things, of course, like security controls and continuous monitoring, how the board handles things. So there's just some commonalities between all of these. Anything you want to call out here, Emily?
I think the biggest one, and I think it's one that a lot of companies miss a lot, is it's not just building an incident response or a cyber recovery or disaster recovery plan, right? It's the testing of it. I think a lot of organizations will spend multi-millions of dollars to develop with a partner or with another integrator a resiliency strategy for how they want to go through the recovery, and they spend so much time doing that they forget to test it. And then as platforms change, as technology evolves, they forget to go through and actually update those processes. So one of the key things that we really want to focus in here today is how can we make sure that the different items that you are implementing into your environment are actually going to make sure that they're tested so that way you can stay up to date and ensure that you're going to be meeting these regulations.
Yeah, that's hits the nail on the head. I couldn't agree more. And we're going to go through some of this in more detail, but you see, regardless of the regulation body that you follow, Veeam has your back in some sense, right? So whether it's backup and making sure your data is available and immutable, whether it's recoveries, to Emily's point, and actually testing and ensuring that you've actually gone through an exercise of not just restoring from a DR, but a CR, a cyber event, and taken those different variables into account. Being able to move your data to cross-platform or cross-hyperscaler, and data security and data intelligence. So regardless whether it's GDPR, NIST2, DORA, et cetera, Veeam fits in with you in some shape or form. Now, what we're really going to focus on in this session is aligning to the NIST framework. And you can always, just for reference, go to Veeam Trust Center and see if you need to find a certification or something that's critical to your business. And you can go to veeam.com/company/trust center to find specific certifications that we have for your organization. But as I just mentioned, we want to help you stay compliant, right? They're so hard to follow all these different regulations. And what's the best way to stay compliant? It can be difficult to go to all these different bodies and try to follow a website and a long checklist. And we found that the NIST framework really encompasses a lot of these different regulatory bodies. If you're following the NIST framework, specifically from a data protection, right, we just touch one piece of the many different variables in your organization. But from a data protection perspective, how can we help you align to NIST, right? So from govern, identity, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Those are the 6 core pillars to the NIST cybersecurity framework in the 2.0 model where they added governance. And what Emily and I want to do in the rest of this session is go through the different capabilities and feature sets you have available to you for each one of these pillars. So to start off with governance, we wanted to start with many of these things you might see in a cyber insurance application, for example. They might ask you things like, do you have immutable backups? What are your RPOs? Have you tested your RTOs? Have you done these things? And as one of my clients have told me in the past is if I can't report on it, it never happened. Doesn't matter if Veeam says it did or if it actually did. If I can't actually prove that it did, it may as well not have existed. So these are just certain things within Veeam 1 in this example where you can prove your backups are immutable. And you can filter by workload, you can filter by jobs, you can filter by restore points to get the type of granularity that you need.
Yeah, more importantly, too, with those reports is that they're going to exist and they're dynamic. So if you need to pull it for a certain time period because you are being audited or you need to prove a specific period of time in which you had immutability turned on for your backups, know that you can go ahead and you can change out those different types of time frames. But then on top of that, you can make this a reoccurring report. So you can continuously get this report delivered to you or to your chief risk officer, or whoever it may be that needs to have access to these documents.
Yeah, really good point. Furthermore, along the same lines, are you meeting that 3-2-1 rules? Many of these regulatory bodies or cyber insurance companies, like I mentioned, they want proof that you have an offsite backup. So you can easily get a list of what are the backups or what are the workloads or the restore points in my environment that I have that don't have an offsite copy, and more importantly, an offsite immutable copy, where, as we've talked to in the keynote and in other breakout session, Veeam Vault is the easy button for that. And proving out your RTOs and RPOs to actually do exactly what Emily mentioned earlier. It's so easy just to say we have this plan. Have you actually tested that plan? When's the last time you updated that plan? All these things that Emily and I see day in, day out in our jobs, in that taking those plans and actually putting them to the test. What does it look like if you have these VMs boot up in the order, this specific order? What does it look like if you actually do need to do a DR from on-prem to the cloud? Is the technology going to meet what the business expects from a downtime perspective and a recovery time perspective?
No, and I think that's important too. You got to drive down that, technology is just one key factor. It's just one component that helps to deliver and make sure that we remain compliant, right, inside of our day-to-day and make sure that we stay operationally resilient. So the technology is just meant to be there to be that driving factor. We still need to think about the processes, the people that are involved, right? And then on top of all that, testing and validating it. So one of the things that you're showing up here is part of the Veeam data platform, and it's a way for us to actually make sure that we are testing the capabilities based off of the business RTOs and RPOs that we're trying to strive for, right? So this isn't Veeam telling you need to hit a 7-day RPO or you need to hit a 24-hour RTO. No, this is a way for you to leverage this tool, have those conversations with the business and determine what is going to drive our overall operational resilience. What does that look like from the business and how do we adhere to that? And now let's go and put those policies in place to find out, does our underlying infrastructure actually meet the needs of the business? And if it doesn't, well, what are some different ways that we can invest in order to make that work for us, right? Is that updating new hardware? Is it changing platforms? Is it leveraging cloud or SaaS-based technologies? really this is a good way for you to really drive down to those key factors around what's going to drive overall resilience.
Yeah, I love the way you put it. The goal of this is to help you be able to prove that you can do what the business already expects that you can do. And then just lastly, I wanted to highlight a few other things here with the ability to, okay, if we actually do a recovery from an audit perspective, what are all the steps that we did? What are the machines that we accessed? What are the machines we remote accessed in and RDP'd or SSH'd in? So just being able to prove out in an audit all those different steps that you took. And Emily, I know this is near and dear to your heart, but what's also really important from a governance perspective is not just depending on Veeam to collect all these different events and log information, but the more this can be integrated with the security tools that you're already using, the better it's going to be from a logging perspective, the better it's going to be from a potential forensic analysis perspective if something does take place. And I don't know if you just want to take a second here to highlight how powerful these security integrations are for end users.
No, absolutely, right? I think for a lot of the organizations you and I speak to, there's two teams, right? You have your IT team and you have your security team, and we're trying to bridge the gap between both of them so that way they can have better actions and be better prepared for when an incident is to occur. And part of that is your security team has made probably multi-million dollars in investments for a security strategy. So they're already leveraging technology that they know and that they trust. They've already built workflows for those different security ecosystem providers that you see up in the screen. So how can we just make it easier to take some of the intel that we're receiving from the data protection standpoint and funnel those in directly into the tools that they're already utilizing, so that way they could just make it a part of their day-to-day activity versus having to go and relearn a brand new tool or having to go and figure out how to make this work for them. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've done a lot of different integrations from our ecosystem providers, from Palo Alto, from CrowdStrike, from Splunk, and we're continuing to add more and more as the year progresses.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Those integrations are so powerful for end users. Now, the next pillar of this is identify, right? And when you think of this in the data protection context, so right, keep this in mind from a NIST perspective, trying to make sure that you're meeting these regulations in the NIST framework, we're really talking about context of data protection. Of course, there's so much more. But what can data protection do to help you identify a threat in your environment? And when you think about this from, I'll kind of call it a better together story, is I think there's this kind of misconception in the industry that an incident takes place in your environment and the security team is going to go to the data protection team and say, please find us that restore point that's clean. We have absolutely no idea. We're totally dark. We're counting on you. And there's a lot of teamwork that goes on. As Emily called out earlier, we want to help bridge that gap between the security team and the IT team. The more that bridge is secure, the easier this path to recovery is going to be. And what you see here is what really happens when it happens, right? So when an incident takes place, digital forensics happens. And this digital forensics, whatever the tool that you're using, builds a pretty confident timeline of events. It finds out what accounts were compromised, it finds out what servers were moved laterally to, what files were accessed, what files were encrypted or moved off the network, et cetera, et cetera. And after that runs, then the security team is able to go to the data protection team and say, hey, we have a pretty confident timeline that we're working. And we can, and especially with dwell time going down as we see with data from Covert by Veeam, we can pretty confidently say we're working from 2 or 3 days ago. I mean, really with Covert by Veeam, they see dwell time be more in the hours than even the days. But let's call it 2 or 3 days for this example. And then they go to the backup team and say, hey, you don't need to mount up all 30 days worth of retention. Let's mount up 2 days ago and then maybe even 3 days ago if we need to, and work in this time frame to figure out what restore point is actually clean. And that's where you get to use these tools like Veeam Threat Hunter and YAR rules to pinpoint what is good before you restore directly into production and risk reinfecting production. And then Veeam really shines with our restore capabilities. This has always been a part of Veeam's backup to give you the opportunity to maybe recover from a cyber event without even touching your backups. I mean, imagine how powerful that would be. The options to use replicas, the option to integrate with your storage array, and of course, instant recoveries off your backups, whether it be to a hypervisor or even to Azure now with Veeam version 13. And Emily, I'm sure there's so much to this slide that you can piggyback off, but there's anything you want to add to this flow here?
No, I think the biggest thing on top of that, right, is the recovery at scale. So, I mean, as we know, once a threat actor gets in, I mean, they're trying to make a mess out of everything. So anything that they touch in there, whether it's one virtual machine, a few virtual machines, or just changes to the actual application itself, right? It's really critical that we're able to test mass recovery at scale, because we're not just going to be restoring a single virtual machine one by one or a single application, right? So we need to make sure all these services are working hand in hand together, and what easier way to be able to do that with building out some of those recovery plans through Veeam Recovery Orchestrator, and still being able to leverage those technologies like YAR roles as well as AV signature scans to go ahead and simultaneously ensure that that data from a large environment perspective is able to be cleaned and validated before recovery.
Yeah, it's a great way to summarize it. So the next piece of this is protect. And I think before we were designed in this traditional disaster recovery world, it was probably thought of that this is really the only part that Veeam or Veeam's competitors fit into, is this protect pillar. So this is the bread and butter of data protection. And what I mean by that is, I call this step 0. If you don't have an immutable backup, step 1 doesn't even matter. So that's why step 0 is key. Immutability is so key, and I know that's maybe obvious at this point, but I still feel like I have to repeat it, because I come across situations, organizations, where maybe they have a primary immutable backup, but they don't have an offsite one, or they have an offsite one, but they don't have a primary one. And a lot of these words are used interchangeably in the industry, and I think that's part of the confusion, right? You hear words like immutability, retention lock, and air gapped as if they're the same, and they're not, right? Immutability means you can't alter the data. Retention lock means safeguarded for the period of the retention policy. And air gapped is separate from production. Now, Veeam makes it very simple to achieve all 3 of these with Veeam Vault. Of course, part of Veeam's DNA and flexibility is you can use your own immutable repository, and we certainly encourage that. But if you want that easy button that's safe from human error, safe from any type of misconfiguration, Veeam Vault is certainly that option. And what you see here from a protect perspective is that you can easily achieve that 3-2-1 rule, 3 copies of data on 2 different media, 1 offsite. So that if a threat actor were to access any one of these resiliency domains, you can still feel confident that you can recover your data. If they access the Veeam appliance, well, first of all, that would be really difficult, because you have SSH disabled, you have MFA enabled, you have 4 eyes authorization, you have all these settings enabled from a platform security perspective. But even if they do, they wouldn't be able to delete backups from there. They wouldn't be able to find and query for credentials to access the repository itself. And then even if they wanted to try to remote access into that second resiliency domain, well, you could disable SSH. And then, of course, you have Veeam Vault, which is completely locked down offsite copy. This is our highly encouraged, high-level best practice to ensure that you have a secure platform. Now, the 4th pillar here is detect, and I think this is one, maybe 3 or 4 years ago that you talked about bridging that gap between security and IT. They would have been like, what is Veeam doing related to detection? And there's so much that we're doing. And Emily, I'd love for you to kind of walk us through this bit on everything that we do before, during, and after a backup that's so powerful to detecting malware and keeping our customers resilient.
No, absolutely. I think Veeam is now setting the standard when it comes to the multiple different ways in which that we can actually, scan for potential malicious or anomalous activity inside of the data itself, but then also make sure that, again, we're funneling that information to the right people, to the ones that can take action on it, and make sure that they can stop the breach before it can go any further. So essentially, when we look at before backup, so we're looking at integrating technology that we brought over from Covert by Veeam. So that proactive recon scanner that you showed earlier, right? How do we do some additional forensic investigation on the data or on the artifacts that were potentially affected? But more so, how do we take a piece of that software and be able to leverage it so that way we can make sure that our data or our infrastructure is going to be well protected, right? So if we start to see brute force attempts because a threat actor has gotten into the environment and now they're trying to go after our backup server or backup repositories, how do we notify on that early and often so that way we could stop them before any additional breach or data manipulation takes place? And now when we're talking about the Veeam Incident API, this is one that I'm actually particularly happy about because we integrate with so many different security vendors, but then also storage vendors. So being able to leverage the Veeam Incident API, if they're seeing information happening in the infrastructure within production before backup even takes place, they can actually send that information directly into Veeam and we can act on it. And they can essentially mark that potential restore point or that virtual machine as something that could be suspicious or hold some type of malicious anomalous activity on it. So that way we're well aware of it before a backup were to take place. And even if they see something like encryption taking place in production, they can even trigger a quick backup. So that way we could try to save as much data as possible during that encryption that's running on that production virtual machine and try to snapshot and be able to recover that data if we need it. Now, moving into during backup, we are the only threat protection vendor that does inline detection scanning. So essentially, when we're taking a backup, we are checking that data across the different blocks from its original lifetime and validating to see what changes have been made. Is there any malicious extensions that live on it? Do we see any encryption taking place? We're able to identify that from that specific algorithm and then provide that information back so that way we could see, is there some additional anomalies we need to take an additional action on? Now, we didn't just stop there from the actual threat detection capability. We also wanted to make sure that we're leveraging IOCs, so indicators of compromise scanner. So looking at malicious tools that we know threat actors utilize to gain access into systems and then perform exfiltration of the data. So we're looking for those suspicious tools that could be sitting on those production virtual machines as well, and then providing that information back as well, so that way we can identify if potentially we had an exfiltration event, not just encryption. And then of course, after backup, let's say everything takes place, we end up having a breach. Now we're having to go through this forensic investigation, we're doing containment, and we're going through this quarantine process of cleaning the data. Well, now I want to be able to recover that data and actually test and validate it with our own signature-based scanning, right? So maybe that is leveraging Yara scanning. So we are provided something from our security teams. They give us a Yara rule to go and look for a very specific malware strain. And now I'm running that across those workloads, across those backups to validate them before we're recovering into production. But also, I'm actually running that inside of that orchestrated clean room. So I have a completely fenced off, separated environment that I can run these tests in without potentially risking any type of reinfection. So all of these items are actually all happening. They're all part of the Veeam data platform, which is amazing because essentially I just have to check a box. And all of these capabilities are running simultaneously when I need them to happen the most.
Yeah, that's such a great overview of the power that we're providing our customers, right? I'm counting here nearly 7 or 8 different types of detection capabilities that we provide. And just to set a little context here on why, right? Why is a data protection vendor trying to detect malware? And the idea behind this isn't necessarily to replace EDR by any means, right? EDR is so sophisticated. The idea behind this is to provide a defense in depth approach. We're touching the data, we're backing up the data, we're accessing the files anyways. So why not get some level of detection when there's so much proof out there that these threat actors find ways to either evade EDR completely or even disable EDR. So even in those cases, you still get a level of detection that's going on. And then furthermore, to Emily's point, you have to plan for zero-day attacks. There's those cases that they evade everything. They evade Veeam, they evade EDR, they evade NDR, et cetera. And to have a process in place to identify the last known good in a zero-day attack is critical. And then lastly, forwarding. We already hit on this a little bit, but forwarding these events to your existing security tools, right? And there's many more that we can do that aren't listed here, but this is critical. If all these events are just going to some of Veeam Abyss or Veeam email, it's honestly wasted, and you should just turn off these features. It needs to get forwarded to the proper security tools and security team. And just to double click on a few of these, I'm going to pick on Recon, for example, is helping you identify that blast radius, saying, okay, if we need to identify the last known good and clean, how can we leverage Veeam to do that? And being able to go in here and say, for a specific workload, hey, help me find ABC workload and its blast radius, and to understand the restore points that were impacted or not impacted and taking action from there. Now, the 5th pillar here is respond, and there's so much. I would make the case we set the trend here in terms of in the industry on what we do from a response perspective, from orchestration and from incident response. The first piece is clean room, and just to double click on that after. What does that after backup look like? What does it actually look like when it happens? It's great that you have these detection and prevention tools, but unfortunately if that worked 100% of the time, ransomware wouldn't be in business. So what does it look like when it actually happens, and how can we have a better plan in place? And this is where a clean room with Veeam vaults or bring your own immutable storage of your choosing comes into place. To have that offsite copy not connected to the production environment, and then having a plan in place that automates the order of VMs, the steps it takes, running Veeam Threat Hunter to get a second opinion, or using YAR rules to confirm it's clean, and doing instant recovery to said hypervisor, or with version 13, doing all those same steps, but doing an instant recovery to Azure if you need to take something completely to a different environment. So the power of this and having this built into place is going to significantly increase your RTOs, or shorten your RTOs, I should say, and reduce your downtime. And Emily, just to kind of piggyback off, I'd love if you can walk us through this, which is kind of showing that same example, but it's showing the storage integration we have with the Palo Alto or Fortinet and their XSOAR capabilities, and how you could set that up and automate that with the security team.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, this is all running directly through Veeam, right? So we work directly with these different ecosystem providers to actually create an app, so that way we can make it easier for you to feed this information directly into the threat intelligence platform of your choosing, right? So we have REST API capabilities. We also have syslog capabilities where all those events will get funneled through, and we actually redid the events so that way they're going to be in the special format that those different security providers actually require it to be in. Once we have a security event that is detected and that gets forwarded into these different vendors, essentially from there, there'll be different types of actions that can be taken place, right? So not only are they going to funnel in, and we're going to see this across a unified dashboard, which is going to be fully created just for you, but on top of that, you're going to have some additional options in there for playbooks that you can run. And these playbooks will help you to either do some additional levels of investigation or also run different types of recovery options as well. So you have different choices that you can make, and it's all built directly into the app.
Yeah, I love this integration, and I've seen, both you and I have seen customers put this to use, and it just saves so much time from their day-to-day job and saves them so much time if an incident actually does take place. Now, the last piece of this response is the incident response piece. And once again, I would make the case that Veeam sets the standard here in terms of offering incident response in one program. And we've revamped our Veeam Cybersecure program for those that were familiar with it. And for those that weren't, no worries, it's bigger and better. So what's in the Veeam Cybersecure program now is you have so many different capabilities in addition to incident response. So not only does this come with incident response on retainer, but it also comes with a dedicated program manager, yearly architecture data resiliency reviews to help you understand where you are on your data resiliency posture management. So maybe if we did it today, maybe you'd end up a little low on that score. But as we do that every year and work with you to ensure you're meeting best practices, next year you end up higher, and the year after you end up even higher, and you can feel more confident in your ability to prevent and respond to cyber attacks. Then you get dedicated security engineering training. This is 16 hours of dedicated security training. Quarterly threat intelligence briefings from Kovler by Veeam, who deals with attacks, over 300 attacks a quarter. Quarterly assessments, and then a ransomware warranty to help you respond if needed, and a TAM included in all that. So there's so much to this cybersecurity program. We could dedicate a whole 45 minutes just to what each one of these bullet points mean, but it's really, really impactful for our customers to ensure that they're as secure and as confident in their ability to recover as possible. Now, the last and maybe the most important pillar here is recover. And this is really where Veeam shines, right? This is the ability to offer, once again, I would say the industry setting standard of the fastest recovery options. Imagine being able to recover from a cyber incident without even touching your backups, right? We're really the only vendor that can make that case. And then, of course, using secure restore capabilities and being able to restore cross-platform. And really what I mean by this when I say the ability to restore for more than backup is in the same console, the same license, the same user interface in Veeam. I can't emphasize it enough, is you can have multiple SLAs, multiple RPOs and RTOs to meet your business objectives, right? So you can have CDP for near second RTOs, right? Essentially just booting up a VM. Same with snapshot replication, VM snapshot replication. Then instant recovery from storage snapshots, which is going to be significantly faster recovering from an all-flash array than a spinning disk backup. And then I still put instant VM backup here because number one, of course, we can do it and we were the first to do it, but this is, otherwise without Veeam, this is really the only option you have available to you. And then lastly, that data portability, right? So that ability to restore cross-platform, and version 13 only makes that more powerful with the ability to instantly restore any workload directly as an Azure VM.
Yeah, and I'd recommend to anybody just to take a screenshot of this slide right here, right? And leverage this for when you're building out your RTOs, your RPOs, or your overall resiliency strategy.
Absolutely. And then this just kind of makes that double clicks on that last point, right? I think we just say data portability and we don't really help organizations understand what that means, but it truly means taking any one of these workloads, protecting it and recovering it literally anywhere. I mean, the power of this, whether it's for migration use cases, whether it's for operational restore purposes, or whether it's for an actual full-fledged DR, CR event, is so impactful for our accounts and customers. So with that, we'll leave you with this. We're not going to go bullet by bullet here, of course, but this is just further enhancing the point. We couldn't get everything into one session. As we mentioned, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of regulations, but there's so much more that Veeam offers from a capabilities perspective that fits into the NIST framework, and you can see it here. And I highly encourage you to do more research on all of these and figure out, as you're making these incident response plans or updating or improving your incident response plans, ensuring all these boxes are checked. And before we end here, Emily, anything you want to have end with the audience here as a last takeaway?
No, like I mentioned, right, go definitely make sure that you check out any of this other information, either through other breakout sessions or also go to the Veeam community site, right, if you want to learn more about the security integrations or those partnerships. Just know for majority of them, we do integrate with so many different security vendors, but then for ones that we're working a little bit more closely with, you can find access to those apps directly on their marketplaces.
Great. Thanks, Emily.
Mm-hmm.